Now, diplomatic row is brewing over claims that Britain has been spying on foreign governments. Reports in British media claim that high-level foreign delegates were monitored at the G20 meetings in London. Now, these allegations do come just days after America's espionage efforts in Africa were exposed. CCTV's Kofam Renje has that report.
Various countries are demanding answers from London. The British Guardian newspaper is reporting that Britain spied on foreign politicians and officials who attended G20 summit meetings in April and September 2009. Countries including Turkey and South Africa have condemned the act as an abuse of privacy. The reports are based on testimony from a former IT contractor who had worked for America's National Security Agency. He previously exposed U.S. intelligence gathering efforts worldwide, revealing how Kenya topped America's watch list in Africa. Kenya is believed to be of special interest to the United States, considering that it is home to the biggest U.S. embassy in sub-Saharan Africa and also home to a United Nations mission. Kenya is also a major communication hub in the region. There's been no immediate reaction from the Kenyan government to the allegations, but the leaks are likely to be a major embarrassment to Britain and America. Kofam Renje, CCTV.
Now, the man who exposed the U.S. PRISM surveillance program, Edward Snowden, told an online forum run by Britain's Guardian newspaper that he revealed these programs because he had hoped that Barack Obama's election would mark a critical change in U.S. policy. But it ended up being disillusioned instead. He insisted that Obama had expanded abusive government programs, his words, not ours. However, the American president has defended two top-secret National Security Agency spying programs, saying the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act authorizes two recently leaked programs, one which gathers U.S. phone records, specifically metadata around that, and another that's designed to track the use of U.S.-based internet servers by foreign individuals with possible links to acts of terror. The former Vice President of the United States under George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, has described Snowden as a traitor who could be sharing secret information with China. Snowden, however, said that criticism is a badge of honor, adding that he has had no contact with the Chinese government. His spokeswoman for China's foreign ministry, Hua Chunying, described Cheney's allegations as, quote, Shian nonsense, end of quote. She's told Washington to come clean on the PRISM program instead. Snowden says he cannot get a fair trial in the U.S. He's vowed to stay in Hong Kong and fight any effort to extradite him. For a little more analysis now, we're now joined by Natalie Ferrier, correspondent over in London. Natalie, exactly how serious are the allegations that the UK spied on G20 delegates, and what would the impact of these allegations be on the UK's foreign relations policy?
Well, Turkey, for example, and South Africa are definitely taking these allegations seriously. It was among their delegates that were spied on. Turkey is already seeing relations pretty strained with the UK. It's saying some of the uprisings have been influenced by international media, particularly, he said the BBC, and that he says this is an international conspiracy. So this is certainly going to add fuel to the fire. They said that this is really alarming and they want questions to be answered on this. South Africa has said they don't have all the details, but in theory they do stand against any breach of privacy, which they said is a breach of human rights. So being taken very seriously indeed by those countries, and also by Russia, who is allegedly also having been spied on. They said it's going to cast a shadow over the G8 meeting that is currently taking place and will strain ties.
Let's play the devil's advocate here briefly, if we will. What could have prompted the UK to spy on African countries? What makes some states in sub-Saharan Africa a valid target?
Well, we are seeing, as part of these revelations, the reasons behind them having spied. In the case of Turkey, for example, they wanted to know what their stance was on financial regulation, so looking to get the upper hand when bargaining on global financial issues, for example. And then in South Africa, this is a country that's pretty independently minded when it comes to international votes and can be a swing vote. So again, they wanted to know what their position was in terms of economics and finance at summits such as these. So really, that's all that's coming out that they were looking at. Nothing further than that, nothing that could be affecting, for example, security, really just a bargaining tool for these meetings.
Indeed, well, all governments really around the world do run their own spying programs. Is the British government likely to justify their surveillance program or even issue an apology?
Well, I mean, we have seen, for example, in the US, President Barack Obama justifying their program. David Cameron has said he doesn't comment on issues of intelligence and security. So at this stage, it's pretty hard to say. But as you said, lots of countries do carry out this kind of surveillance, and in fact it was the Conservative government in 1994 that allowed for this kind of surveillance to take place as part of the Intelligence Services Act. This was broadened to include economic issues as being in the interest of national security. So really this surveillance in terms of what these countries would say about financial regulations seems to in fact come under that. So there is a law that says in fact that Britain can do this when it comes to surveillance of foreign diplomats.
Indeed, quite a bit of cloak and dagger stuff going on across the pond. Thank you very much for that. CCTV's Natalie Ferry over in London will be keeping tabs on that. And of course, the stories that come out of the G8 conference as well, right here on CCTV. Time for a quick break. Here's what's coming up.
How's Madiba doing?
He's doing very well.
Path to recovery. Nelson Mandela's condition continues to improve. And unleashing full potential. We'll be focusing on the process of rebuilding Somalia.
Breaking news. Global trends. CCTV News brings you stories with the different aspects of Africa in the international content. With our reporters across Africa and all over the world, we'll tell you about the real Africa and how it impacts the world. Africa Live, every day, only on CCTV News.
We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need some trade justice.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world.
Let's move on to South Africa now. The former president of the Rainbow Nation, Nelson Mandela, who's being treated in hospital for lung infection, is said to be making steady progress. His daughter, Zenani Mandela Dlamini, was quoted on Monday saying her father is doing very well. The 94-year-old anti-apartheid leader, who became South Africa's first black president in 1994, was rushed to hospital on the 8th of June. CCTV's Maria Galang has more.
Family members of former South African President Nelson Mandela visited the elderly statesman as he spent his 10th day in a Pretoria hospital. They inspected a gate where flowers and notes were left by well-wishers over the past few days and collected several of them before quickly walking back to the hospital. Social media mentions, songs, telephone calls, cards and more messages of love have come from across South Africa and the world for 94-year-old Mandela. The family says these have provided comfort and hope as Madiba remains hospitalized in a serious but stable condition. One of Mandela's daughters, Zenani Dlamini, gave what appeared to be the most positive update yet on his situation as she looked at well-wishers' cards hanging outside the hospital.
How's Madiba doing?
He's doing very well.
South African President Jacob Zuma said on Sunday that Mandela remains in a serious condition, but he said doctors are seeing sustained improvements. Mandela has been treated in a hospital several times in recent months, with the last discharge coming on April 6th after doctors diagnosed him with pneumonia and drained fluid from his lung area. He has been particularly vulnerable to respiratory problems since contracting tuberculosis during his 27-year imprisonment under apartheid rule. Maria Galang, CCTV.
11 minutes into the hour, let's cross over live to CCTV's Guy Henderson. He joins us live from outside the hospital in Pretoria, where Nelson Mandela is being treated. Guy, there's some unconfirmed reports that Mandela may be released from hospital soon. What can you tell us about this?
Well, I'm not quite sure you can call them unconfirmed reports, to be honest. I think they're just rumours at this stage. Certainly, there has been a shift this week away from whether Mr. Mandela would make a recovery to when he might be released. It is now day 11 in hospital. His last day was only 8 days. And of course, he can receive constant treatment from an expert medical team back at his home in Houghton in Johannesburg. So I think I'd venture to say that there is a feeling here that he may be allowed to go home soon. But I don't think we'll know for certain, possibly when a convoy drives out of this hospital with an ambulance amongst it, or perhaps not even then, perhaps only when the presidency releases a statement saying that he has been allowed to go home.
Indeed, family members, of course, also seem to be increasingly upbeat about Mandela's recovery. How's this affected South Africa's sense of assuredness and optimism, if you will, about his condition?
I think there is a growing confidence now amongst South Africans that Nelson Mandela may well be able to celebrate his 95th birthday in much better health, and that comes in exactly a month from now on the 18th of July. I think people do now think he is well on the way to recovery, and as I said just now, it does look as though he may be allowed to go home soon. Certainly, though, there was a fear for at least several days that he may not have been able to do that. Certainly to be 94 years old, to be suffering a recurrence of this lung infection, pneumonia, I think it's fair to say that the odds are against someone in that condition. But he does appear to be making it through. Certainly, though, that word fighter was used several times by public officials and the family, which does suggest that he may have had to fight in that hospital behind me. But that's something, of course, that South Africans know only too well. He is very capable of doing. So I think definitely a confidence now that he is in much better shape, but obviously still that lingering question as to whether he'll be able this time again to be able to make a full recovery.
Indeed, we'll be keeping tabs on that story right there. Thank you very much for your time. That's CCTV's Guy Henderson live in Pretoria, just outside the hospital where the former president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, is being treated for that recurring lung infection. Still in South Africa, let's take you 37 years back in history to a massacre that took place during apartheid rule that shocked the world. Nearly 200 students lost their lives in a protest against the introduction of Afrikaans and English as the only languages of instruction. June 16th is now celebrated as the Youth Day to commemorate the bravery of those students. CCTV Sun Lan has more.
This is the most famous picture from the uprising 37 years ago. Hector Peterson, a student shot by the police during the demonstration, was carried and rushed to the hospital by his classmates. He later died and became the first student casualty.
But today is a particular day, because in these situations it's often the youth excuse me. It's often the youth that are in the front line. So it's important that we remember our shared history, because this is not just important for South Africa. It's important for citizens all over the world to remember that this is what racism produces, and that we shouldn't allow these things to ever happen again wherever we live.
In 1976, an estimated 20,000 students took to the streets of Soweto to protest the government's unfair treatment of black students. The police shot at them. About 200 died and more than 1,200 were injured. But Sisiwe Shambango was among the many students in the protest. Shambangong says that was indeed a dark day in the history of South Africa.
I got injured in my back. I have a scar in my back. I was running over the fence there, down that, running away from the police.
In 2002, a museum named after Hector Peterson was set up to remember the students that lost their lives. Every year on this day, local students come to visit the museum and learn about the stories of those children to whom they now own their opportunity to study. 18-year-old student Marco and his band are here, and they have composed a song for the heroes.
My mother is calling me, wanting to know where I am. The cries of the mothers, which mothers were crying during the 1976 Soweto uprising, knowing that a mother was crying, saying, "Where's my child? Where's my child?" In Zulu we said, "Uguphi umntanami." Mom yang biza, my mother is calling me to come home.
The Soweto uprising was a turning point in South Africa's fight against apartheid. It eventually led to the demise of this unfair system. 37 years has passed since then, but just like this picture, the bravery and the spirit of those students has been internalized and will inspire people in their pursuit of freedom and equality forever. Sun Lan, CCTV.
On the east coast of the continent, Somalia is recovering from a devastating civil war that lasted for more than 2 decades. Now the country is on the road to reconstruction, with funds that once used to be used to buy food aid being replaced by reconstruction finance. Turkey has been at the forefront of rebuilding the country, but other countries are now increasingly attracted to what once was called the White Pearl of the Indian Ocean.
International state institutions now contribute to the financing of development projects and reconstruction of Somalia, replacing what was earlier emergency food aid donations. Turkey has been the most robust in the reconstruction of Somalia. Turkish companies have built schools and public facilities and are now working on the capital's restoration of pavement in the city's streets.
But particularly the countries that very much expressing quite interest is Turkey, who has been trying to get involved in Somalia over the last 2 years. There are a number of countries, including the US, who are also eyeing on Somalia as a potential investment by the business community of that country.
Aside from taking part in renovating the airport, Turkish Airlines remains the only international carrier with 3 direct weekly flights to Somalia. There is as well the presence of busy Turkish construction companies in the capital.
In this area that you see in this facility, we are going to make a concrete producing plant and the briquettes and sidewalks produce stone producing facilities. And also at the backside here, we are going to make an asphalt plant.
Saudi Arabia recently launched the first phase of projects for reconstruction and development of Somalia at a cost of $72 million under the auspices of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The Somali government now says it prioritizes reconstruction of its war-ravaged country and the provision of basic services to the citizens.
I would like to remind everyone that Somalia is now a place of reconstruction, which requires attention that is bigger than before. We are determined to rebuild our country, develop our economy, and provide for our children's education and health services.
At the recent UK-organized London conference, 54 friendly nations and partners of Somalia met to craft a new beginning for the Horn of Africa country, where millions of dollars in development and reconstruction was pledged. Though Somalia faces a rather long road towards reconstruction, the country emerges from being the poster child of failed African states. International institutions financing various development projects are key in rebuilding the country that has been embroiled in a 2-decade conflict. Mohammed Hirmogi, CCTV, Mogadishu.